Hey kids, it is Dr. Michael Lennox here, your ambassador to conscious embodiment. I'm here to talk about April. This is my April monthly forecast, and what a month we're in. Of course, we start out with just being the sun in the Aries mansion. We are in the Aries mansion still, which began last month. And of course, one of the interesting things about March was Aries is cardinal energy, movement energy. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It's ruled by Mars, which loves action. It's fiery. Cardinal energy is a quality of movement that starts things up, right? So the minute we got hit with this cardinal Aries Mars-oriented action thrust of energy a few weeks ago, bam, we had to suddenly stay inside. And so part of the energy of the month includes the fact that we spend most of the month in that Aries mansion with that fire in our belly while the world is telling us we got to be still, we got to move slow. When the real thrust of this mansion is about goals, movement, and moving forward powerfully. So we got to start with that energy. Right as the month begins, on the 4th of April is the first big peak of energy that connects to everything that's happening on the planet that really rose up in January. So if you've been paying attention to the astrology, you may already know this, that the big shifts and changes on the planet that we're seeing right now rose up with the power of Pluto, gravitas, change, the Lord of the underworld, death itself. And Saturn, reckoning, responsibility, karmic lessons. They came together early January, and that was when the virus was exploding around the planet, and the Brexit was happening, and the impeachment in the United States, and the fires in Australia. That January energy, while it began to subside immediately once it peaked in early January, because Saturn kept moving, Pluto moved slower, and they're only going to hit once, and it already happened. Jupiter is in Capricorn as well this year. Jupiter is the planet that brings bounty, expansion, abundance, prosperity, and all things related to good fortune, the things we would call good, are Jupiter's domain. So Jupiter in Capricorn this year is goal-oriented, steadfast, allows us to move towards our goals in a powerful, steady sort of way. But of course, we also have to interpret planetary movement with the life events that this year is bringing us, like we've never seen before. And one of the challenges of Jupiter in this scenario is, one, Jupiter brings only good things, and he can't bring anything, other than what we would call expansive and delightful. But he has an artifact of bigness, so that if the environment that he finds himself in is filled with difficult and challenging experiences, he will make them bigger, because that's what he does. He makes everything bigger. And in the world of astrology, there is no good, bad. That's us. We decide that this is good and this is bad. And a virus is a bad thing because it kills people and makes people sick and is scary. But in consciousness, it's not a bad thing. It's just information. It's just the new thing that has occurred, and we have to acclimate to it. Jupiter hitting Pluto is the first peak of energy that connects directly to Saturn and Pluto in January. So in some ways, the expansion that the pandemic is creating has a kind of a rising level watermark in just a couple of days in early April, with this conjunction of the change and transformation planet Pluto meeting up with the expander. Now, Jupiter also invented world travel. So I think that it's easy to interpret into the expansion of the virus on the planet. Moving around the globe so easily was Jupiter's doing. And so you can look at that peak moment in early April as potentially being the top of the rise of the expansion energy. And once Jupiter moves on, that could slow down. And Jupiter is going to turn around and retrograde back this way in June and in October. So I don't know what that's going to bring, but I do know that the current escalation does have a peak. It happens right in the beginning of the month on April 4th. And we will know more energetically what the rest of the year might feel like as a result of what happens in April. And that is true astrologically in the way that I'm describing, and it's also true epidemiologically and virology-wise, because as we get more data, we will know about the future based on the past. And it's just interesting to me that there's an astrological energetic correlation to that very same possibility. Not for nothing, for those of us who are also up to things and interested in work and the stuff that we're creating, the power of Jupiter connecting with Pluto this year means that the movement that we're creating, the goals that we have, and the desires to expand and create more prosperity for ourselves have the gravitas of Pluto built into them as well. And so April becomes a month of productivity and power with the vision that we have for moving forward. And I understand that it's hard to see the future vision in a beautiful and powerful way when the present moment is so sort of debilitating and scary, but it's happening. There is energy that thrusts us forward in terms of the goals and the achievements we wish to, move through this year. The early part of April is good for that. And so if you're working on anything, enjoy that thrust of goal attainment movement. The full moon that happens this month is in Libra and happens right after that peak of Pluto and Jupiter coming together on the 4th. Just 3 days later is our full moon. So the full moon in Libra has that power of change and transformation and expansion built into it. I also, though, Libra always puts us in mind of relationships because Libra, Venus ruled, invented intimate relationships. Libra is also where we first understood that the world out there is a reflection of the world in here. That means this year too, the virus is a reflection of the collective consciousness's need to change, to shift trajectories. And the hallmark of unforgiveness and forgiveness is also part of the Aries mansion. Aries energy, Mars ruled, is about the aggressive masculine principle of just doing, of movement. And it includes anger, resentment, and all of the masculine ways we object to what might be happening in the world. Libra, Venus ruled, is all about forgiveness, taking those upsets of the Aries consciousness and turning them into forgiven spaces. So I love that message for the month of April, that all of us can be doing whatever we need to do in our personal experience of the energies that we're moving through. And certainly for that full moon on April 7th, which happens, by the way, in the evening hours, Pacific time, about 7:35 p.m. The degree point is 18 degrees of Libra, right smack dab in the middle of the sign. And gratitude and release is what we do in all full moons. And I certainly want to emphasize in the gratitude portion, forgiveness, seeing the world as whole and complete, even amidst the appearances that might tell you otherwise. Though this world appears to be falling apart, Aries, I embody balance, wholeness, forgiveness, and love. That's the opportunity in this full moon in Libra. And I invite all of you to lift up some of your personal expressions of how you want love and forgiveness and relationship to show up in your life in this full moon, to throw a nod or two towards the planet, because we can use all the forgiveness we can get. Pretty tremendous wildcard energy with that full moon, because Mars and Saturn are conjunct right now. So action and doing and lessons and karma are a part of this month. And that energy squares Uranus, which is the unstable, anything can happen, wild card energy. What I have to say about this is Uranus just wants to wake us up to a higher level of consciousness. And in this full moon moment, that will happen to a certain extent in a sudden and unexpected way. The higher you are operating in your consciousness, the more likely this sense of possibility of love and forgiveness will come from an inner inspirational place. Saturn and Mars squaring Uranus means if you've got something to learn, if you're in lesson learning mode right now, you're going to be knocked on your ass with this full moon. So just know that and understand that as we move through it in terms of how well you are doing in the experience of recognizing that anything you see out there is a reflection of what you're experiencing on the inside of your consciousness. And if you want to have a more loving, balanced, and forgiven experience out there, it's got to start with you. And this full moon is going to knock some of us to the curb if we're not rising up to our own level of conscious learning. So have fun with that. One of the most important things about April is around Venus's retrograde. Venus is going to go retrograde in May and June, and she starts her shadow in April. So from April 9th through May 12th, Venus will be covering territory that she will backtrack over again in her retrograde. All retrogrades are a process of integration. We go inward, we go into the unconscious a little bit and do some processing. That's why they're a little befuddling. When it's Mercury, we're processing how we think, what we think, and we bump into the furniture a lot because Mercury is our navigating mechanism. And when he goes retrograde, we just can't see straight and we trip a lot. Venus retrogrades are less befuddling on a day-to-day basis, but will put your relationships, your intimacy experiences, and anything about the giving and receiving of love into process. That process doesn't start until May, but from April 9th to the end of the month, Venus is telling you what issues are going to come up in the latter part in May when she goes retrograde, so pay attention. If stuff happens in your love and relationship life, anything that comes up is going to be revisited in the retrograde, whether it's a positive, affirmative experience of giving and receiving love or a challenging one. Both possibilities will show up in the retrograde. Your navigating of that is dependent upon how much you're paying attention from April 9th to May 12th. One little note about Venus retrogrades is lots of exes tend to return, and probably not to get back together, probably to help you understand how far you've come since you ended that relationship. So if someone shows up, be a little wary before you decide you know why they've showed up. On the 17th of April, Saturn's going to do something really interesting with the nodes of the moon. The nodes of the moon are a point that represent the collective consciousness of the planet. The nodes and the angular relationship between them and the sun is what creates eclipses. Eclipses are very democratic. They hit the whole planet all at once. So in that spirit, the nodes of the moon also relate to everything that's hitting the planet all at once at the same time and in the same way. The collective consciousness itself. The idea that all of us are sharing a realm of consciousness. Last month, Chiron, the healer, touched the nodes, bringing a wounding healing experience. So did Uranus, the great awakener, sudden unexpected adjustments to the collective. Then the sun did it last month. So we had this conscious awareness that everything was changing on the planet. Saturn's going to create the great eliminator with the north node of the moon on April 17th. This is not an event-oriented transit. You're not necessarily going to feel this or see this as something happening. But it is a demand. Saturn always demands. It's a demand to change the track that the collective is moving on. Now, we got to do this globally, but I got nothing I got nothing in that. I can't change the globe, nor can you, but we can all change the insides of our own consciousness. And this is a definitive signal that this is a shit or get off the pot moment of upping your spiritual practice on the planet in order to serve others. And April then becomes a month that, well, between March and April, the collective is never the same. And I just love that Chiron was the first to hit the collective. So the wounding healing experience of a pandemic is part of that. Then Uranus came along. And so it was like we were knocked out of balance from that. The sun allowed us to be consciously aware of the changes that were happening. That was last month. And this is the month where the pedal really gets to the metal about how well are you diving into holding inner consciousness space of healing and love and balance and harmony, so that you can help the world come to that vibration, that you're not participating in the fearful, frightened way that polarization threatens to destroy the planet. I think that we're in a rich moment of doing it differently, and Saturn in conjuncting the North Node is definitely part of that. On the 19th, we change mansions and we move out of Aries into Taurus. That should be a welcome change of energy. I think it's been difficult to be in the fiery energy of the Aries mansion and have to be so contained. Taurus energy is already grounded, stable, and slow moving, and ruled by Venus. So we've been sort of following Mars's lead right now. So, you know, aggressive, masculine, fiery energy. I think it's going to feel good to be in the Taurus mansion when Venus is in charge and grounding connection to the heart sort of reigns. There's a new moon in Taurus just a few days later on the 22nd of the month at 3 degrees of Taurus, the sun and the moon at 3 degrees of Taurus, Uranus at 6 degrees. So this new moon conjuncts Uranus. That's fantastic for any intentions you set that are far-reaching or that need a miracle, because Uranus brings the wildcard energy and the miracle energy. And so I invite you to think big in your new moon intentions for the end of April, because it's like a mega dose of Taurus love by having Uranus participating in this new moon. The new moon itself also connects angularly to the nodes of the moon. So the story of the nodes alone would make an incredible article or teaching on astrology. The idea, again, Chiron, healing, wounding, then Uranus, off balance making, Sun brings in the awareness, then Saturn comes along and says, yeah, you got to practice a little bit differently. And then this final new moon in Taurus at the end of the month, also angularly connected to the nodes of the moon in a very tight way, says, and we impact the collective by creating a new way we live in our hearts. And that's the power of that new moon. Have at it, everybody. Stay safe, stay protected. Remember your spiritual practice, and remember that what you see out there is a reflection of what's happening in here. Know that and use that disparity to help transform the planet, so more of the loving impulses that we're holding on the inside will begin to show up on the outside as well. Thanks, everybody.